Welcome. This is a quick summary of a conception of the social world that fits with the philosophy of social science, which we will be considering in this class. So, the view of the social world, which I'll be working with, is an actor centered view of the social world. I use the term methodological localism in contrast both to methodological individualism and methodological holism. Methodological localism gives primacy to the idea of the socially constituted and socially situated actor, that the social world consists of a number, sometimes a small number, sometimes a vast number, of socially constituted, socially situated actors. This view also takes the view that there are higher level social entities, things like social institutions, organizations, social structures, and we could collectively refer to these as social assemblages, but that all of these kind of what we might call higher level social entities require micro foundations at some level or not. And there are different ways of specifying the requirement of micro foundations. My approach is a fairly liberal approach. It is simply that it must be feasible to provide an account of how a causal process or a causal relationship, which we postulate at a higher level, how that causal process is embodied at the lower level. Crucial to the conception of the social world, which we'll be considering in this class, is that causation is crucial for social explanation, and that the best way of understanding causation is through the idea of a causal mechanism. There's no single unified causal process in the social world. Instead, there are multiple social causal mechanisms. The final idea, which I want to introduce at this point, is the idea that the social world is not unified. Rather, the social world is heterogeneous, that social entities or social assemblages are plastic and change over time, and that there is a high level of contingency in the social world. So, if we were to take this idea of the social world seriously, take it as a premise for understanding the social world, then it's very clear that we need to have a theory of the actor. We need to have a theory of how it is that individuals, these socially constituted, socially embedded individuals, how they act, how they interpret their actions, what meanings they attribute to their actions. We need a theory of the actor. In fact, we need multiple theories of the actor. And there are multiple theories in the sociological literature and in the philosophy literature. We can think of theories which are inspired largely by Aristotle, the idea of rational, purposive, intentional action by the actors. But we can also think of human action as being often driven by scripts and habits. So the person who is playing the role of a fire chief or a legislator has in mind a set of ideas and kind of habitual ideas about how a fire chief or a legislator should act under certain circumstances. We also understand that human beings, that human actors, have a capacity for cognizing the world around them. And how do they do that? Well, we need to have a theory of the cognitive frames in terms of which they understand the world around them. And this is a very specific topic for empirical conceptual investigation. But in addition to cognitive frames, we human actors also have cultural and normative frames. And we can't just take it as a given that, yes, culture exists. Rather, we need to have sociological and conceptual theories of what culture is and how culture and individual mentality interact. One nice example is the work offered by Granovetter on the topic of embedded rationality. But pragmatism has emerged in the past 10 years, 15 years, as an alternative to a more Aristotelian rational choice or desire, belief, opportunity kind of theory of the actor. And pragmatism in the hands of people like Neil Gross and other distinguished sociologists, emphasizes the ideas of scripts and habits and um, opportunities that individuals pursue as they undertake action. Irving Goffman's contributions to the theory of the actor are very important. It is one thing which distinguishes the idea of methodological localism from methodological individualism is that we take social interaction as being really fundamental to the social world. And so patterns of and social realities of cooperation, coordination, as well as competition and strategic interaction, the reality, the psychological reality, but also the social reality of solidarity and commitment, these motivations which individuals have to act out of regard for the interests of their group or of individuals and groups that they care about. The working of convention as a solution to problems of coordination. This is an important topic within the theory of social interaction. And we need to refer to theories of social interaction in order to account for the reality of collective action, and especially collective action in pursuit of public goods. But we also have to recognize that many actions, and especially actions of groups and larger ensembles of individuals, often have unintended consequences. And finally, we would like to have some idea of what the mechanics, the mechanisms are that lead to alliances and parties and social movements. So is there such a thing as a group as opposed to an individual human actor? Are there collective actors? Do groups have intentions? And various philosophers and sociologists have taken the view that there are such things as group intentions. The view which I'll be presuming and arguing for at various points in this course is a view which emphasizes that groups consist of individuals, and yet there are features of intentionality which we can attribute to ensembles of individuals, but we have to be very specific and careful in terms of how we provide an actor-centered analysis of collective actors. Work which I particularly admire, a body of work, comes from List and Pettit and their theories of group agency. Margaret Gilbert has written for a long time on the importance of social facts as opposed to individual facts. Contentious politics is an especially interesting and important example, maybe more important than it appears, because we might think that contentious politics is really all about civil war and collective action. But actually, we can see the mechanisms of contentious politics in almost every aspect of social life. And certainly the advocates of the theories of contentious politics, like Doug McAdam, believe that the tools of contentious politics theory are applicable in many different social contexts, not simply civil war and ethnic violence and so forth. The approach which has been taken in recent, meaning in the last 2 decades, recent studies of contentious politics encourage focusing on a meso-level approach to contention rather than a macro-level approach. In other words, rather than trying to formulate a theory of civil war or revolution or ethnic violence in general, we should look instead in a more disaggregated way at what the mechanisms of contentious politics are. So when we consider rebellions, riots, or uprisings, we should be looking for what are the underlying mechanisms and processes at the meso level composed of the actions of socially constituted individual actors. This is the position, the approach which is taken by McAdam, Tarrow, and Tilley in their, in my opinion, very important book called Dynamics of Contention. There is no general theory of civil war offered. Instead, there is a disaggregated analysis involving multiple mechanisms of mobilization, escalation, leadership, and other mechanisms of contention. And this suggests that there is no possibility of a correlates of war methodology. We are concerned, if we take this approach that McAdam, Tarrow, and Tilley and other sociologists and political scientists have taken, then we want to understand what are the motivations of the participants and what are the social mechanisms, the cultural mechanisms, the normative mechanisms through which groups are mobilized and motivated to act in concert with each other. Chuck Tilley introduces the idea of a trust network, for example, and argues that we can't really have contention, can't have successful collective opposition to a set of power holders unless there is a basis of trust which is established among those who may be mobilized to contribute to contentious action. Tilley has been, throughout his long career, has been a source of ideas within contentious politics, his idea of repertoires of contention, the point about trust, the point about the differentiation of contentious politics. Tilley has been just a fount of important theoretical and sociological ideas in the study of contention. Now moving up a little bit, institutions. We think of social arrangements, social assemblages that are functioning, quote, at the higher level, at a level which set constraints and opportunities for individual actors. Institutions are among those higher level assemblages. As a quick definition, we might say that an institution is a system of rules, practices, incentives, and resources that are socially embodied and that structure actors' behavior within a broader set of social arrangements. Institutions involve norms, constraints, and social reproduction. And it is pointed out by people like Kathleen Thalen in How Institutions Evolve, it is pointed out that institutional arrangements have remarkable durability through time. An idea which I also believe is a very important idea is the idea of an institutional logic, an explanation based on an institutional logic, which we could define as the effort to explain distinctive social patterns and outcomes based on the incentives, constraints, and resources which are constituted by the rules of the game. In my first book, The Scientific Marx, I argued that Marx's arguments about the falling rate of profit, for example, or the tendency towards technological innovation within capitalism, that these are institutional logic explanations. Another higher level assemblage, but still notably at the meso level, not at the macro level, not at the highest possible level, but another important meso level social assemblage is the idea of an organization. A working definition of an organization might go along these lines. An organization is a system of coordination of the activities of a large number of actors in pursuit of a set of goals stipulated by the mission, the directors, and executives of this assemblage. But here is a crucial reality. Organizations always contain diverse and somewhat independent groups of actors who are subject to their own objectives, their own constraints, resources, and incentives. This implies that organizations are rarely fully unified systems of decision-making and implementation, as the distinguished organizational theorist Herbert Simon sometimes asserts. Rather, we can think of organizations in the way that Pflegstein and McAdam, but also Crozier and Friedberg, suggested that we should think about them as strategic action fields, groups in which there are systems of individuals and smaller units who are in a situation of having different priorities, sometimes cooperating, sometimes competing. Another mid-level social idea, social construct is the level of ideology, norms, and practices. And here we're referring to mental frameworks and practices. But the actor-center approach, which I'm suggesting to you, implies that ideologies also must be transmitted and maintained through concrete social mechanisms. We can't simply wave our hands and say the ideology of capitalism is such and so. Instead, we need to have a theory of what the concrete social mechanisms